I'm Jessie. I'm 19 years old. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? I always believed in love, but it hasn't always been rainbows and unicorns. Not every story has a happy ending. Of course, I knew that first loves are rarely happy, but I couldn't even imagine that mine would end up going to the police and revealing a complete scam. My first love's name was Arthur. We met in school. He was really nice and chivalrous. Tried to date me. We were in love, but broke up just after 2 short months. I was deeply hurt and I felt lost. I mean, it's been 4 years, but I still think about him. We broke up because Arthur dove deep into studying, and his parents were against our relationship. His family wasn't really well off financially. His parents want him to grow up to be successful and rich. And in their eyes, I was a distraction. Why did I give up so easy? Very simple. One day he said, "Sorry, but now we can't be together anymore." And just like that, he slammed the door in my face. Hysterical, I ran away from his house. So 4 years have passed since we saw each other last time. My broken heart healed slowly over time. I lived up my life, made plans, and wanted to move to Europe. Until one day when I was scrolling through my Facebook newsfeed and saw a notification about Arthur's upcoming birthday. It's like I was struck by lightning. I went over to his page and started checking out our pictures together. I was overcome by memories and feelings. Have you ever missed your past? I decided to go to our favorite restaurant, ordered our favorite pasta dish, and then I got a call. It was Arthur and he invited me to his birthday party. I was shocked but promised to consider it. I got butterflies in my stomach and my heart was racing like crazy. Arthur said that he's way more mature now, realized his mistakes before and wants to make things right. I agreed because I still had feelings for him and really wanted to see him again. But of course I was afraid that he'd hurt me again. When the day arrived, I wore a stunning dress, put on my best shoes, called a cab, still being worried and anxious, and headed to the birthday party. I saw Arthur right away. He was waiting by the curb. It seemed like these 4 years never even happened. He gave me a hug, and my legs gave way from the excitement. We went inside the house, the music was blasting, and it was very loud from all of the people's voices. I looked at the crowd and was growing uncomfortable, but Arthur put an effort to make me feel at ease. He cuddled me and asked me to go into his room so that we could talk. Arthur was telling me about his time without me. In his words, it was a difficult time. His parents demanded that he had a 4.0 GPA so that he could get a scholarship. He said that he'd be able to get into college and even open his own small business, and that he was thinking about me this whole time. And now his goals were achieved. He couldn't deprive himself of the pleasure of being with me. We chatted for a while about how we'd changed during this time. Then we returned to the party. I kept catching his flirty gazes at me. First time in a long time, I was really, truly happy. After the party, we continued seeing each other, and after a week, Arthur offered to make it official again. His parents didn't interfere with our relationship anymore, plus college was over. We graduated. At first, I didn't want to tell my parents about my relationship with Arthur. I was afraid that they'd be pissed off. They could clearly remember how I was before and my broken heart and state of mind. We were finally enjoying each other. And then one time we were shopping together. Arthur took me to a jewelry counter and offered to try on a ring and earrings. I put the first ring I saw on my finger, when all of a sudden Arthur asked, "Will you marry me?" Of course I said yes. I know how to tell my parents. To say they were shocked from this turn of events is to say nothing, but they had to accept it soon. After a while, however, Arthur changed. I was nervous and thought it was my fault. I begged him to tell me what was wrong. It turned out that his business went under and he needed an investor ASAP. I found out the details and talked about it with him and offered my help. My dad's help, to be exact, right away. I begged my dad to give him money. I said Arthur had problems and he urgently needed a sizable sum of money. He'd pay it all back as soon as he had an opportunity to. Arthur jumped right into work mode. He did complicated calculations and was always busy spending time at work, at his desk. Even when we were falling asleep next to each other, Arthur was talking to himself about something in connection with his business, and I felt a little bit uneasy. My dad agreed to give him the money. That same night, we transferred the entire amount. My dad probably finally calmed down and suggested we have a celebratory dinner in honor of our engagement. And to strengthen their relationship, of course, he wanted to learn more about Arthur. During that evening, Dad and Arthur kept making fun of each other all night long. I looked at them and my heart filled with joy. I thought they really clicked. A little bit later, they were joined by my dad's business partner. Uncle Frank stopped by to give my dad some papers. My dad always treated him like a brother and a part of our family. I loved him like an uncle since I knew him, since I could remember. That's why Dad asked him to stay. He left later that night, though, and my dad took Arthur into the guest room. I went to bed in my own room, but later I decided to check on Arthur to find out about the evening. But he wasn't in the guest room. I didn't really pay attention to that fact and just went to bed. Arthur left in the morning, but in the afternoon, my dad stormed my room absolutely furious. I have never seen him that mad. He said that the safe in his room had been broken into. The money that he was supposed to give today to his partner was gone. Of course, Dad accused Arthur. I wasn't able to say a word when Dad stormed out of my room and called the police. Police searched the house for a long time. I couldn't turn Arthur in, even though I suspected it was him too. So I said that he spent the entire night with me and only left my room early in the morning. I felt awful. How could I be such a fool? I believed Arthur again. How could he be a criminal? I simply just couldn't believe it. I headed straight to Arthur's house and wanted to find out about everything. He was watering flowers in the yard. He was grinning widely and seemed overjoyed. I hugged him first, but then I kept my distance. He asked me to wait for him inside. When I sat on the couch in the living room, I felt there was something under me. I searched with my hand under the couch. Nervously, I pulled out a bag full of money. I was shocked. Despite having certain suspicions, I felt sticky sweat on my forehead. My hands were shaking, and my head was spinning. Money? Arthur? So it was him? I was empty inside. I kept replaying pictures of us together in my head and couldn't believe it. It couldn't be the truth, could it? I called the police and said that Arthur was the thief. It was the hardest decision of my life. I admitted to being in love with an asshole and told myself I just shouldn't hide it. Police arrived the same moment as Arthur was entering the house. He was astounded to say at the least. He looked at me and kept asking what was going on. I couldn't even look him in the eyes. I was pissed at myself for being so trusting of him. The police took the money and Arthur, and I called my dad, sobbing into the phone. I confessed that I lied to him and the police about what happened last night. Arthur was released in a couple of days. He drove straight to my house with the cops. The cops told my dad that Arthur wasn't the thief. The money was the profit from his business, and he was going to use it to repay my dad. My dad looked bewildered. He couldn't accept the news. He shook Arthur's hand emotionless and just patted him on his shoulder. It turned out that Dad's partner stole the money. He'd been committing embezzlement for 10 years. I remember Dad saying that someone close to him was stealing his hard-earned money. Police caught him randomly. His ex-lover who he dumped and broke her heart exposed him. Dad's partner broke into the safe himself, emptying out completely. Dad has been with his partner the entire time he had his business. These news were shocking to him. He trusted him just like himself and always treated him like a family member. After some time had passed from these events, we had a wedding. A band was playing and my dad got drunk and kept hinting about grandchildren. I invited all of my girlfriends. Friends were toasting, saying amazing words. I was so happy. You can't always see the real nature of a person behind a friendly mask and pretty words. But it's not the reason to believe in true love. If you like this story, definitely click and subscribe to my channel. Have a nice day!
With the last of my strength, I pounded on the door. Somebody help me. I'm stuck here. My vision was blurry, and I could feel my breathing getting harder by the second. My legs buckled. God, is this the end? And this was supposed to be a normal trick. I loved magic tricks since I was a kid. When I first saw an illusionist perform in a circus, I decided that when I grew up, I would become a famous magician. My parents, of course, thought it was a childhood dream, but I did not give up on it and still became a magician in a local circus. I quickly achieved fame in my city as one of the youngest and most ambitious magicians. Everyone knew that my signature act was a card trick over a crocodile pool. Everyone was thrilled. And soon I even had my own show, and no one could compete with me. But then Ed showed up at our circus. He was a great magician, and we were always competing. Of course, it didn't end there. We could argue right before a performance and quarrel about who came out first. Our rivalry would go on forever, but one day, the director suddenly announced that 2 magicians in the circus was a lot, and only one of us would have our own show. My jaw dropped. What? I was the best, and everyone knew it. But the boss was adamant, and he said that the one who caused us tear at the next performance would get the show. Great, it was time to put Ed to shame. To win, I decided to repeat one of the greatest tricks of illusionists. But which one? I thought about the sewing trick, but it was outdated, so I couldn't really impress anyone with it anymore. Then I watched enough performances of Houdini, my idol, and I wanted to repeat his trick with passing through the wall. But no matter how much I tried, nothing came out. You gotta be kidding me. I would never put Ed to shame that way. I needed something new, something that would make everyone gasp. That's right, I needed to come up with my own trick. I ran into the storeroom and looked around for equipment that would inspire me. A hoop was boring. A cage. There were already 1,000 tricks with it. And then the wardrobe caught my eye. What if... I clapped my hands together. The disappearing trick. This was what I needed. Thanks to it, I would become famous all over the country and prove that I was 100 times better than Ed. It remained only to prepare the wardrobe. I'd been working tirelessly all week, converting the back of it into a hiding place for me to hide in. And instead of a real wall, I made a fake back wall. Ed had always intended to find out what I was doing. He'd come into the workshop by accident, or he'd sent his friend the juggler. But I'd always kicked out anyone who came near my wardrobe. This was supposed to be a surprise for everyone, including the artists. I was already anticipating Ed's stunned face when he saw my furor. And then the day of the show came. Ed was the first. I watched his performance skeptically from behind the scenes. A transparent cube of water was brought to the stage. It looked impressive, and I tensed. What did he prepare? Then Ed's assistant wrapped a chain around him and threw the key away. What was he going to do? Before I knew it, Ed jumped into the water cube. Wow. Was he really going to get out of there? The cube was covered with a screen, and neither the audience nor I could see what was happening there. Time passed, and Ed still didn't get out. My mouth was dry with excitement, and I tensed in anticipation. God, what if something happened to him? It was the first time Ed had ever performed such a dangerous trick, and even though he annoyed me, I didn't want him dead. Why didn't he get out? And then, just as I was about to make a dash for the cube, Ed surfaced and walked back onto the stage without the chains. I let out a sigh of relief, and the audience erupted in applause. Ed's performance made a splash. Relief was replaced by anger. Well, my performance was 100 times better. Ed bowed and went backstage. As he passed me, he winked and chuckled. Don't get too upset when you don't get applauded. What? I exhaled loudly and clenched my fists. Now you will see who's the real star here. At the same moment, my name was called, and I proudly walked out onto the stage. The assistants had already prepared the inventory. The wardrobe stood in the middle of the cage with the lions, which were temporarily tied up. I walked slowly to the wardrobe and bowed to the audience. Everything inside me was fluttering. Dear viewers, I will now show you a trick that no one has ever performed before. I'll disappear right before your eyes. The whole room froze in anticipation. The assistant untied the lions, and they came toward me. Okay, calm down. I have to disappear right before they get to me. Forcing a smile, I defiantly stepped into the closet and closed the door. I quickly pulled back the wall and hid in a hiding place. From the outside, it looked like I just disappeared. Then I heard a creak. The real door was opened, and the whole room gasped. I just smiled triumphantly. Got it, Ed? I'm cooler. But when I heard the roar of the lions walking next to the wardrobe, I felt a little creepy. Being in such close proximity to the predators was very scary, but the things we do for the sake of focus. There was a burst of applause, as if the audience was simply delighted. Yes, it was really worth it. Gradually, the applause died down, and I settled back in my hiding place. I had to wait until the evening, and then, when everyone left, I would get out as if nothing had happened. It was incredibly boring, but I tried to occupy myself with thoughts about the future. I was going to be a great magician soon, and they would buy tickets for my performances for a year in advance. And then the show ended, and everyone left. Time to get out. And just as I was about to open the door, the wardrobe shook violently. There were muffled voices outside. We need to get it back to the back room. What do you mean to the back room? No, I'm here. Wait, I was just about to bang on the door when I felt a sharp push. I hit my head on the top, and in the same second, my vision blurred. I didn't even notice I passed out. When I woke up, my head was pounding, and I didn't even remember where I was right away. Cramped, dark. Damn, I was still in the wardrobe. I had to get out of here. I tried to push the door open, but it wouldn't budge. What was this? I pushed it again, but in vain. And then I was afraid. God, what if I couldn't get out at all? Panic gradually filled me. I immediately started banging on the door as hard as I could, but it wouldn't budge. I quickly ran out of strength and leaned against the wall. Uselessly, tears began to form in my eyes. Was this stupid wardrobe going to be my coffin? In despair, I sat in the wardrobe and thought about how stupid my death would be. The magician died because of the trick. It is the most delusional thing you can think of. After a while, my stomach rumbled. God, how long had I been sitting here? How hungry I was. I cursed the wardrobe idea and the desire to be better than Ed. Did I really need this? Ed was not really such a bad person. Yes, we fought a lot, but always because of our rivalry. The rest of the time, Ed was polite to me, always offering to help. For example, when I forgot my umbrella, Ed gave me a ride home. Or when I didn't take the money for lunch, Ed bought me snacks and didn't even ask for anything in return. And when my trick didn't work out and the audience laughed, Ed didn't mock me, but on the contrary, supported me and said that everyone had ups and downs. Why was I so cruel to him? And now I wouldn't even apologize. Because I was stuck in this stupid wardrobe. My eyes were heavy with exhaustion, and I felt sleepy. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes, falling asleep. I woke up to the sound of soft voices outside. God, did someone come? I wanted to scream, but I only let out a small sob. I must have been so weak that I lost my voice. Despair washed over me. What should I do now? I listened and recognized Ed's voice. He was telling his juggler friend that he was worried about me, and he even searched the whole circus, trying to find me. A pleasant warmth spread inside. I'd always been unfriendly to Ed, and he was the only one who cared and looked for me, no matter what. The juggler calmly replied that I must have gone off somewhere to celebrate my furore. No, Ed, don't believe him. I'm here. There was a moment of silence, and suddenly Ed breathed out that he really liked me. My jaw almost dropped. Ed went on. Despite our bickering, he knew that I was a very smart and talented girl. The mixed emotions made my head spin. God, Ed. In a weak voice, I tried to call out to him, but I could already hear the footsteps receding. No, was this the end? It couldn't end like this. I hurriedly tried to unscrew the nuts on the door, but they won't budge. Pain shot through my arm, and on top of that, I cut myself. There was blood on the palm of my hand. Not this. I was terrified of it. My breath caught in my throat, and I couldn't get enough air. I tried to take a deep breath, but there was a lump in my throat. With the last of my strength, I pounded on the door and shouted, Ed, I'm here, here. But my vision was clouding, and my legs felt weak. It was too late. As I fell, I saw the door open, then darkness. I came to myself in the dressing room. Ed was sitting next to me, squeezing my hand. I asked weakly, "Did you get me out of the wardrobe?" He nodded and immediately handed me a glass of water. Was this horror over? I couldn't believe it, and I sincerely thanked Ed. If it hadn't been for him, I would have died. Ed smiled faintly. It turned out that I was in the wardrobe for a few days, and only Ed thought to look for me. A lump rose in my throat. I immediately hugged Ed, apologizing to him for everything, and he said that he was no better. He was always competing with me, even though he liked me very much. I looked down, embarrassed, and breathed. "Yes, Ed, I heard your words then. I really like you too." Ed suddenly blushed, but decided that it was impossible to retreat, and he asked me out. Of course, I agreed. He saved my life. We both realized that we were wrong in our rivalry. After all, no victory is worth your life. Over time, Ed and I started dating. He turned out to be a really awesome guy, and instead of competing, we created a joint show. And it made a real splash. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you.
We were driving at night and chatting merrily. Dad said the new town was small and had better ecology, which was good for me. Moreover, the principal of the local school I was about to go, Mr. Hill, was Dad's best friend. He'd take care of me. Suddenly we heard a loud pop, and our car swirled on the road. I closed my eyes in fear. Dad brought me back to my senses and said he needed to go for help as one of the tires burst. So I stayed alone on the roadside. A pickup truck stopped near me. Guys started whistling and asking to take a ride with them. It was so scary what to do. One guy left the car, grabbed my hand and dragged to the truck. I screamed as loudly as I could, and then Dad showed up. The guys left right away. The entire next day I was recovering, but then pulled myself together and Dad and I went to school. The principal was so glad. We'd signed lots of papers and finally I headed to my new class. The door opened and I froze. Seated by the front desk was one of those guys. Can't be. My vision blurred and I swayed. The principal introduced me, wished me luck and left. To make matters worse, the only spot available was near that guy. Mr. Brown, the art history teacher, told me to sit near Ethan, so that's this hooligan's name. I barely could breathe during the entire lesson and was scared even to look his side until Ethan poked my side and whispered, "Come on, sorry, we were idiots." I smiled nervously, but seemed it was a relief. After the lessons, Ethan followed me, asking where had I come from. And then Dad saw us. He attacked Ethan, shouting and threatening to call the police. Mr. Hill was near and hurried to help, so the principal learned what happened. He announced Ethan it was the last warning, or he'd never have his GSE. Ethan hadn't succeeded for long. Soon we had yet another newbie, Carter. Ethan said during the very first break that there was a necessary initialization to jump out of the window. Otherwise, all the classmates would bully Carter until graduation. It was on the ground floor, but right under the window was a muddy puddle. Carter climbed to the windowsill and looked out, and then he was pushed. Ethan never made it to Mr. Brown's class, and soon we learned he was dropped out. For several days I've been thinking of Ethan. He was evil, but he must have had a chance. I asked Dad to talk to Mr. Hill, but Dad replied, I just should keep away from Ethan. Daddy, I just want to help him. And you promised to fulfill all my wishes. This is my first and last request. Then he looked at me sadly and said Ethan would learn the truth sooner or later and would then turn his back upon me. Ethan returned to school, but the principal said he must catch up with us in all subjects or there'd be no more hope for him. Ethan addressed me in the canteen and asked to help him. We were studying for several hours after the lessons until his friends came and called him a nerd. Don't listen to them. You must study to graduate and go to college. Big Jack replied that I was messing with the wrong guys. He grabbed me by the collar and dragged to the window Carter was thrown from recently. Help someone! The window opened and I saw a huge muddy puddle. There I go. Suddenly someone pushed Big Jack violently. It was Ethan. He said to Big Jack to get lost or he'd be in trouble. I threw a grateful look at Ethan and whispered, "Thanks." No one had ever interceded for me before. After that, no one interrupted us, and we studied every day both at school and at my place. Ethan turned out to be gifted and studied fast. Soon you will improve your grades and won't need my help anymore. He looked at me gently and replied, in this case, he'd worsen them again. What? Ethan, don't say this. It won't do any good. Seems we shouldn't see each other anymore. I said this unwillingly. Ethan seemed to sense this, came closer and kissed me. I'd lost my sleep since then. We spent all our free time together, walked and talked a lot, and once Ethan brought me to a roof where was a beautifully set table right under the starry skies. Ethan embraced me from behind and whispered he'd like to say something important. My breath was short and my heart sank. We'd gone too far. Ethan, no, don't speak, please. It is me who needs to confess. I'm terminally ill. Blood cancer is killing me. Dad and I moved to this town hoping its good ecology might prolong my life. But I keep breathing only because of you. Ethan suddenly jumped to his feet, shouting I was a traitor not saying anything to him, then claimed he didn't want to see me anymore and ran away. I knew this was coming. My heart ripped in pain. I'd cried for several hours on Dad's shoulder and he stroked my hair. All is over. Forever. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Dad went to open and I heard him scream, "You? Get out of my home! Get lost!" I came there and saw Ethan with a huge bunch of flowers. Ethan said, "Please forgive me, Mr. Powell. I was an idiot, but I love your daughter with all my heart, and if you let me, I'll be with her, no matter how long she has left." Dad was silent, then shook Ethan's hand and stepped aside. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "I love you and I'm ready to spend by your side all the days you have," and hugged me. After graduating, we traveled to the ocean. I knew already I had only a couple of months more, but I was happy to spend them with Ethan. My life might be short, but I had time to meet my true love. Like the video? Subscribe and give us a like. Support the channel. Thank you.
I've been banging on the cafe's WC door for 15 minutes now. Man, couldn't stay there for an hour. I was wearing a gorgeous cutout dress and this fool hesitated and went to the toilet as soon as he saw me. Well, you're not a hottie either, you know. Stooped boy with greasy hair. The waiter came up to me and said that there was no one in the toilet. Dave ran away. In the evening, I returned home completely broken. I don't know what I did wrong. I looked at myself in the mirror. My friends at school said I was lucky to be cheesy and to have a nice face, as the guys are crazy about it. But that dude ran away as soon as he saw me. Maybe I'm just too much for him. This thought calmed me down a little, but I had to find the guy. As there was only a week and a half left to the prom, and I still don't know who I was going there with. There wasn't much time left, and I decided to change the profile photo on the dating site, especially since I hadn't changed my clothes after a failed date yet. But as soon as I chose the angle and arched in front of the camera, my mother came into the room. She had always been strict, but now she looked at me and went mad. She said that I was dressed vulgarly and that I disgraced the family by posting such photos. She took a sweater out of the closet and told me to change immediately. Okay, Mom, just stop yelling like that. She closed the door behind her, and at that moment, I received a text message. Some guy was asking me out. In the photos, he seemed confident. Certainly better than that loser who ran away from me. Maybe I still have a chance to find a date for the prom. I woke up very early to have time to choose a nice look and do my makeup. But it turns out that my closet was completely empty. Did Mom decide to throw all my clothes away? I was furious. And I decided that as soon as she returned from work, I would tell her everything. It was only an hour before the date. I was ashamed, but I couldn't go naked. I had to put on that granny sweater. On the way, it seemed to me that everyone was looking around and laughing at me. But surprisingly, Joe liked the sweater. He said I looked like a true lady in that outfit. Thanks for your tact, Joe. The date was going fine, but we were sitting by the fireplace and I was sweating from the heat. Finally, I decided to take off that sweater and stayed in one thin t-shirt. Joe immediately quieted down and stared at me. I didn't understand what happened. But suddenly he said that he had to go. Like he allegedly had some urgent problems with the water pressure at home. At home, I tried to convince myself that I got myself unstayed in vain. Maybe Joe really had something serious going on. But when I decided to call him and check how things were going, it turned out that Joe blocked me. I lay in my room and thought what those guys didn't like about me that much. And suddenly, I heard a beep. And it was a new message. Maybe one of my dates decided to apologize for running away? But no. It was another guy from a dating site. His name was Tom. I wasn't sure I wanted to go on a failed date again. But Tom looked so handsome, tall and athletic. And as it turned out, he was fond of natural sciences. I know you can't tell by my looks, but I love biology and want to go to medical school, in which Tom is just studying. Wow. I wanted to learn more about college and the upcoming exams, so I finally agreed to meet Tom at the coffee shop. The day before the date, I prepared my best outfit. Fortunately, my mom didn't throw away my things, but just washed them. I was so worried that I even came to the cafe ahead of time. And then I saw Joe at the next table, the one who blocked me. He sat with a girl and sweetly chatted with her. Oh, you! I went up to him and started yelling. How could you do this to me? Joe blushed and said I'd lied to him. He likes girls with small chests, and I have a big one. And I had a different photo on the dating site. What the heck is he talking about? He took out his phone and showed me. The ABC of Loyalty website. There was a picture of me, but I had small boobs. And I looked completely different in a long dress and a headscarf. Someone registered me there and photoshopped my photos. Joe said if I had smaller breasts and less provocative manners, he would have stayed. What an idiot! I turned and ran to the bathroom. I didn't know who registered me on that website, but now it was clear why the guys were running away. All because of my big breasts. I looked out at the bathroom, and Tom was already sitting at the table, and then I realized that most likely he found me on the same website, which means I'm definitely not going to live up to his expectations. Crouching, I made my way to the exit. He didn't seem to notice me. On the way, I wrote to him that I was not feeling well and would not come. I came home in a terrible mood. Mother came into my room to ask me something, and I just burst into tears and told her everything. I don't usually have much of a heart-to-heart conversation with her, but I felt so bad. I said that I liked Tom and I was afraid to go to a meeting with him because of my breasts. My mother hugged me and began to calm me down. She said I shouldn't show my breasts, and she was right. I decided that I would do everything to make my breasts seem smaller because Tom likes this. I immediately texted him that I was ready to see him. The next day, I wrapped my chest in bandages and went on a date with Tom. I even put on that stupid sweater so Tom wouldn't notice. The date was great, but I was always afraid that Tom would find out about the bandages. And when he tried to hug me, I immediately pulled away. Tom pretended not to notice, but at the end of the date, when Tom walked me home, he told me I was great and that he was looking forward to seeing me again. I spent the whole evening thinking about Tom. Does he really like me? I shared it with my mom. Maybe he doesn't care about breast size, and I can take off the bandages. But my mother began to say that I looked depraved with big breasts, and as soon as he sees it, he would immediately run away. I was shocked by my mother's words, but I was afraid of losing Tom. What if Mom was right? On the second date, Tom said he wanted me to meet his friends. Wow. It's so cool. The main thing is that no one knows what I'm hiding. At the party, it always seemed to me that I did not hide the bandages on my chest well. I ran to the bathroom every 5 minutes to fix the bandages that were coming out from under my crop top. Once again, when I was rewinding my breasts in the toilet, a girl noticed me. Heck, that's all I needed. But I quickly lied that I had recently been in an accident. The girl made a sympathetic face and left. She seemed to believe me. I was just calming down when one of the guys offered to play strip cards. Not again. I lasted a few rounds, but I still lost. I had to take off the tunic and stay only in the top. I began to refuse, saying that I was embarrassed, but my friends only made fun of me. One girl reached for my clothes. Now everyone will see the bandages. I couldn't stand it and ran away. I heard Tom calling for me, but I didn't stop. All I could think about was that I'd shame him in front of his friends, and all because of my chest again. I came home and burst into tears. My relationship with the only guy I ever liked is ruined. I had no prom date. Well, at least I could take off the bandages. The skin under them was all bruised. I noticed my mother's tablet on the table in the living room. There was an opened app with that bloody ABC of Loyalty dating website. Out of curiosity, I opened a personal profile, and it was my profile. And on the tab below, there was a photoshopped photo of me. So it was my mother who registered me? The doorbell rang. I didn't want to open it. I had to deal with my mother. The guest called without stopping. Who the heck is there? There was Tom standing in the doorway with a huge bouquet of roses. Came to see if I was alright. I interrupted him and told him that wouldn't work out. Guess I actually have big breasts, and I dress differently. And in general, I'm a completely different person, not the girl from the profile picture. But Tom didn't understand what my breasts and clothing style had to do with it. And then he took my hand and told me that he didn't care about the photos. He cared about me the way I was, and it wasn't about the size of my breasts or my style of clothing. He was fine with me. I looked at Tom and didn't believe what was happening. And at that moment, my mother came out to us. She heard their conversation and lowered her eyes. She admitted that it was she who posted the photos on the ABC of Loyalty website 6 months ago, and she added that in her youth, guys were only interested in her body and no one was interested in what kind of person she was. Thanks, Mom. I knew you meant well, but now I'll do everything on my own. I took Tom's hand and we left. By the way, as you can imagine, I didn't go to prom alone.
Hi, I'm Lily and I'm 18 years old. Have you ever lived with your boyfriend's family? Would you be able to stay with them day and night without being able to leave? Watch the video to the end and find out how I was left without housing at the university, and I had to learn to live by someone else's rules. I had just finished school and wanted to go to a prestigious university, and I was interested in a specific university in the city where my boyfriend lives. Every night, I imagined how I got the news about the successful matriculation and was going with suitcases on the train, and Eric, my boyfriend, met me at the station with flowers. But first, I had to get a recommendation to the university, and I got it. After that, I was invited to a month-long preparatory course, and this was already an application for admission, because these courses greatly increase the chances of being among the government-subsidized students. There were only a few days left for gathering, and I headed out to meet my happiness. Eric, of course. Eric was living with his parents, and I was supposed to get a place in the dorm. When I arrived, I went there first. The dorm was quite nice, cozy and clean, and it was located a few steps away from the university. But I didn't have a chance to live there. The manager said that the place had to be given to a foreigner who didn't know the language at all and had nowhere to go. As if I had somewhere to go. Have you ever screwed up big time? Write it in the comments. Although, of course, Eric's family always treated me well and I could come to them at any time. But still, I was counting on the dorm, and here's such a bummer. There was nothing to do, so I asked my boyfriend to let me stay at his house for a month. Fortunately, permission was granted, and soon I was unpacking in my new room. Not the one where Eric lived. Eric and I were old enough to share a room, and both he and I wanted to, but his mom insisted that I stayed in the guest room. However, the main thing was not that, but that I had a roof over my head, and now I could fully devote myself to studying and not think about everyday problems. On the evening of my arrival, Eric's parents had a lavish dinner. I had to admit that his mother cooked just fine, and I had already decided that I would take a couple of lessons from her in the future. Either the hard road took its toll on me, or the nerves from the fact that my place in the dorm was given to another applicant, but I ate in 3 throats. At one point, I was even afraid that I would be considered a glutton. After a delicious dinner, I was so sleepy and I went out like a light. In the morning, when I went to the bathroom, I almost smashed a mug that was standing on the floor right next to my room. I thought it was weird, so I went to ask Eric. What he said shocked me. It turned out that his mother put my mug under the door, implying that I hadn't washed the dishes, and she hated mess and dirty cups and plates and all that. At first, I felt wildly awkward and then somehow even offended. Well, I just arrived, did not settle in, experienced a lot of wild stress, moved into the house of my boyfriend, and it was clear that I was in a kind of prostration from all this, and the last thing I thought about was the dishes. But when the resentment passed, I felt very ashamed that I was causing a mess in someone else's house and causing discomfort to people who had done me so much good. So I decided to immediately correct and clean up in the kitchen, to do spring cleaning and thereby make amends. It was just the right moment. Eric and his parents were out shopping, and I had a few hours to spare. Thank God I managed everything and sat waiting for the family with impatience. The door opened, and his mother was the first to go inside. I greeted her with a face like a Cheshire cat and personally called her into the kitchen to demonstrate the cleaning. But instead of praising me, she just started yelling, starting to get hysterical. Eric's mother was like nothing I'd ever seen, and I could feel her every word on my skin. It turned out that it was not about cleanliness, but that after cleaning, all the items were not in their places. Eric came running to the screams and tried to calm his mother, but she was getting more excited than ever. I was in such a shock. In this state, I saw her for the first time, and I was very much scared of it. I didn't know where to go from embarrassment, shame, and guilt. Fortunately, my study on this day lasted until the evening, and when I came home, I hoped that they had already had dinner and went to their rooms. Eric's mother cooked chicken and was waiting for me. At dinner, she pretended that nothing had happened, but the air was bursting with tension. Eric tried to smooth things over with some stupid jokes, but it only made things worse. And then, suddenly, his mother said that she would make a list for me personally of what was forbidden to do in this house. All this while Eric's younger brothers giggled. Have you ever been in a situation where to be swallowed by the ground would be the best solution? Tell us how it happened. I needed to let it out, or I would have exploded right there. In tears, I called my mother and told her everything. About the room that was separate from Eric, about the cup under the door, and about screams after spring cleaning when I was working hard for several hours. But there was another problem. From all these worryings, I began to have academic troubles. I couldn't concentrate on my subjects. Lectures went in one ear, out the other. My mother listened and was surprised, supported me, said that I needed to abstract from everything and throw myself into study. I had just hung up when I heard Eric's mom scream outside the door. She asked me to leave immediately. She had brazenly eavesdropped on the conversation, and now she was going to set all the dogs on me. She shouted that she would not allow me to say such things about her, and that I was a nobody, and that I owe them, and all because they gave me a roof over my head and fed me for free. The whole family came running to the screams, and Eric tried to stand up for me, but then it came to him. And then his mom said, "It's either me or her." How could I let Eric make that choice? What for? I went and packed my own things. I was so sad and heavy at heart. On the one hand, I felt a sense of shame. On the other hand, although I knew that I was also guilty, but I did not think that I deserved to be treated like this. Was I so guilty that she could humiliate me like this in front of everyone? A couple of hours later, I was standing at the train station with my suitcase, and I had to take a couple of days off from university to collect my thoughts and decide how I would continue to live. Coming home did me good, and I only realized how important it is to have a home of your own where you are loved and expected. But a few days of rest passed so quickly, and I had to go back. And I didn't want to do it. First, I had to find a new place to live. I couldn't live in Eric's house anymore. Second, Eric himself never gave any news about himself, and I began to think the worst. Did he leave me? His mother must have whipped him, and now he didn't want to talk to me anymore. And if so, why would I ever go back to that city and go to university? While I was thinking about all this, the doorbell rang. Eric was standing in the doorway. He gave me a bouquet of flowers, asked for forgiveness for the conflict, and said that he was taking me, and now we would live separately. My parents supported his intention and promised to help me with the money. And then it turned out that Eric's parents also did not mind that we lived separately and also promised to help with the money. We found the apartment quickly, and it was a wonderful time. I studied, then came home. We cooked dinner together, chatted until night, and so on for days on end. And then, all of a sudden, Eric's mother appeared on our doorstep. She asked for forgiveness for what had happened and promised to come to visit. Such a load from my soul fell, you would know. I still need to establish a dialogue with her in case she becomes my mother-in-law in the future. Did you like the story? Give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you click on the bell icon, you won't miss new episodes. I wish you to achieve your goals and find an approach to each person.